I'm Stephen Cowan. I'm a board-certified pediatrician. I've been practicing for 30 years. One of the biggest questions I get asked as a pediatrician is how can I get my kid to sleep at night? And it's a big subject, but one of my favorite ways to start that dialogue is to look at how you get your child to sleep the first time. What I mean by that is whatever routine you've built in has conditioned your child to go to sleep a certain way, and you have to change that condition. Children, like all of us, are creatures of habit. And so changing a habit of going to sleep is one of the biggest gifts you can give your child. How do you change a habit for your child? You start by creating a routine that's like a sacred routine, meaning consistency, every night, lovingly done, hypnotically done. And it always works as long as you're willing to stick with it. You can also introduce herbs, like Griffin Ivy Rose's product called A Night, that help set the stage for the body to relax into sleep. So there's no right or wrong to the routine you create for your child going to sleep, although I would recommend no screens for an hour before going to sleep. But other than that, create a routine that feels good for you. Just stick to it. Consistency is security for your kid. One of the questions I get asked a lot is, how can I get my child to stop throwing temper tantrums? I have a hint for you guys. You can't get your child to stop doing anything. If a child is throwing a temper tantrum, one of the hilarious things you can do is ask him if he's having a temper tantrum. You can say something like, "You're really frustrated right now, right?" And if a child answers even yes for a second, you've broken it. Now, if a child can't answer because they've gone from 0 to 60 so fast in a temper tantrum, and some fiery kids are like that, then you say, "Oh, I get it. You're really frustrated. You need to have a temper tantrum right now." And that usually nails it. Stops right then and there. Another big question that gets asked a lot is about discipline with kids. And what I tell every parent is the root of the word discipline is disciple, which means student. So start by asking, what is it that you're teaching? What is your goal of learning before you start sending someone to jail? Right? If we are constantly trying to prove we're right and they're wrong, and we throw a lot of shoulds at them and shouldn'ts at them, there's no love in the room. You could call that tough love, but it's actually not love, because there's no real understanding of what's going on inside them, what's alive in them at that time. Order and control are basic needs. Control usually comes from feeling out of control, and so we try to control all the variables, which is a losing proposition. So the real need is order, a sense of consistency, continuity. That's a beautiful thing. There's nothing wrong with that need. So the frustration, which bubbles up to rage and then screaming, is simply coming from a need for order, which is exactly the reason your child is screaming. Now, if you two can come to terms with the order that you want, then you can solve it together. But first you have to humanize yourself and have empathy for yourself and help your child have empathy for you. The teaching of empathy, which is love, the teaching of empathy is so valuable that your child will much more likely do well on an interview for college or on a job interview if he knows that than how to stay out of jail. Often when I get asked questions about discipline and temper tantrums, these are the high energy, volatile situations that drive us all nuts and are pushing our buttons. The first thing you want to ask is, what is the real situation, as opposed to speaking in generalizations? Like, how do I stop temper tantrums? Which temper tantrum? Tell me the real story. The question is, what's the button that he's pushing in you in a real situation? It's your button. It's your spiritual button. It's your practice. It's why you're on this beautiful planet right now, is to work on that button that he's pushing. It's not his fault that he's pushing the button. You've got that button sitting there waiting to be pushed. So what is that button? Ask yourself that. And then you honor the button pusher who's driving you out of your mind, making life unnecessarily chaotic, and say, what is he asking me to work on in myself? And I know the answer for you is patience. My beautiful daughter, I was running a very busy pediatric practice in New York, and invariably my daughter would have her biggest temper tantrums when I was talking to a parent, out on the street or in Toys R Us or in some place like that. Why? Why there? Because she knew I was jammed up, right? She was so smart. They choose where to have these. They're looking to connect. We all just want to connect. And that's a very effective way of connecting when you get your mother yelling at you. How do we find time for real quality connection? What are the parameters of finding time to connect? Some parents will say to me, there's never enough time for them. They just want more and more and more and more. Yes, that is absolutely true. Who has had enough love in their life? Finding time to connect with your child is a 36-hour-a-day job. It could be 2 minutes. Eat with your child. Read to your child. Watch a movie with your child. Go for a walk with your child. Spend time in nature. Watch a sunset with your child. 2 minutes. Point stuff out. Let him know what you're feeling. Connect at that level of the heart and ask what he's feeling. It's not rocket science. What's the epidemic of our time? It's alienation. Everybody's feeling alienated. Everybody's feeling disconnected. Everybody's feeling uncomfortable in themselves, connected in their body, connected from their doctor, connected from their parents, connected. All these connections matter deeply. One of the big habits that we've seen is 5 people feel more connected because they're texting each other, but they're actually not quality connection time. Quality connection time is sitting next to somebody, looking in their eye, asking questions of them, hearing the tone of their voice, watching their body language. Parenting 101 is connection. Connecting, if you make connecting your goal as much as possible, the quality of connection, that sacred connection where you feel understood and you feel like you're understanding. So your child feels understood by you. Make that your goal. Quality of connection means touching someone's heart. It means understanding what's alive in them and helping them understand what's alive in you. When I talk about alive, I mean feelings that are constantly swirling around inside you. The way I describe it to kids is that feelings are like the weather inside you, always changing, always mixed. And when you're curious about the weather inside someone else, then I don't care if you're texting or Skyping or G-chatting or Snapchatting. It doesn't really matter as long as you're curious about what's alive in the next person that you're trying to connect with. One simple guideline with screens, because it comes up so much. For every minute that you're on a screen, spend a minute in nature. That means all screens, TV, iPad, everything. Add them up and don't bank them for another day. So what happens if you hate nature? And my answer to that is you are nature. And then we have to look a little deeper into why do you hate yourself? And that leads into an understanding of, well, what does that mean, nature, in me? And one of the best examples of that is all the bacteria that are living inside you, all the good bacteria that are living inside you. You can go for a walk in nature just by giving your loved one a massage. If we are nature, that's spending time in nature. East versus West medicine. So my path through the 35 years that I've been a pediatrician started out as a conventional pediatrician, trained in New York City, and I got a little disappointed as I watched kids grow that I realized that Western medicine is amazing for putting out fires, for emergencies. There's nothing better. It's unbelievable when you're dying or you're having a heart attack or you're bleeding, and I was a hero of that. The problem is that's only 1% of health problems. And when I went out into my practice, I realized that I barely used that. And if you use that model of emergency medicine model For things that aren't emergencies, you cause more problems. And I don't want to cause problems for nice families. So I had to find another way. And that's where Eastern medicine, which has been doing this kind of holistic, big picture, growing for thousands of years, kind of gave me what I needed to provide a much better solution for parents who have kids who aren't falling asleep or at night or have ADD or are nervous or countless things. Essentially is about growing a tomato plant. West is about fixing a car. There's a place for both of them. But when we're raising a kid, it's much more like growing a tomato plant. Holistic medicine sees the body in a context of its environment, both inside and outside. Sees it as a system, as opposed to just looking at the little parts that I was trained in Western medicine. And one of the big systems that's very hot these days and trending is the gut health, because the gut is the brain. It's the place where we bring information in the form of food, break it down, keep some, and get rid of some. And that's what we call learning. And in children, they're learning all the time. So what I refer to as the gut is the neurogastroimmune system, one system, holistic system, neurogastroimmune. What happens in the gut happens in the brain. What happens in the brain happens in the immune system. So if you want to improve the immune system, you start in the gut. If you want to improve cognition in the brain, you start in the gut. It's the doorway. And it turns out we're not alone. There are these thousands and thousands and thousands of bacteria and funguses and all this whole community that helps us get there. And if we don't honor that, we can't get there by ourselves. I'm a developmental pediatrician. I like to call myself a holistic developmental pediatrician, which is a unique niche in seeing the child in the whole cycle of their life. And it's perhaps the most rewarding thing I do in my life, watching how children move and navigate different stages of life. As I lay it out for parents, what I find is when I can hold the big picture of where this child is going, what stage is coming next, all the fear comes out of the picture for parents. Because big picture calms everybody down. When you're caught in the middle of an emergency, it's easy to panic. So there are certain stages in development that are critical. Being born is a big one. Or the end of the fourth trimester, meaning the first 3 months after you're born and you're this blob and suddenly you start using your hands. Big step. Learning to crawl. Learning how objects exist behind other objects. Huge. Language comes from there. Separation anxiety comes from there. Stranger anxiety comes from there. The terrible twos. Volatile frustration. It's not fair. I don't want to stop. I don't want to go to bed. Big developmental stages. Important stages. They serve a purpose. But perhaps the biggest developmental stage, certainly in the first 7 years, is what I call the Furious Four. The Furious Fours ultimately starts with one word, and that word is why. Why opens up our world to the fact that there's strings attached to everything. There's a why for everything in the room you're in right now, but you can't see it. That drives little kids nuts. Their mind explodes because ultimately they were living this very happy life when they were 3, where things just magically appear, birthday cakes appear, and Christmas appears, and now there's a why for everything, and it crushes them. And to navigate it, ultimately they ask, why do we have to wear shoes? Why do we have ears? Why do we have to go to school? Why do we have to wear But ultimately it's about why do we die? That's what they're dealing with. And if they don't travel through that stage smoothly with you, loving and understanding them, it gets stuck in there. So listen for the why in a child as they're moving somewhere between 3 and 6, and get ready. Don't fear it. Recognize that when a child is going through this revelation that we all die, whether he's the little kid who's stepping on the ant and you're saying, don't step on the ant, and now you're thinking you have a psychopath on your hands, when in fact he's doing this experiment to understand where did the death go. Recognize what he's needing is some kind of sacred ceremonies in his life at that point to comfort him. Religion was invented to help us get through this concept of death. All the great transitions are all linked to whatever you believe in. It's not about a religion, it's about ceremony, sacred ceremonies that get us through transitions. You can make up your own tradition. It doesn't really matter, but use it. Think of all the great transitions, birth, coming of age, death. All of these big things matter. Ceremony means consistency. Consistency is security. One of the biggest questions I get asked is, how can I get my kid to eat, or eat right, or eat healthy? And it's one of these difficult questions because already the question is telling us there's a lot of tension around eating in the family, and no kid wants to eat when there's tension. So the first thing you have to do is get off your high horse. Don't worry, your child's not going to starve to death if he doesn't eat his green beans. The second is, recognize how to make eating more meaningful for a child. And there are essential reasons why we eat. We eat for fuel, for energy. We eat for fun and entertainment. We eat for bonding and connecting. We eat for the ceremony of eating, the aesthetics of eating. And we eat to find meaning in our life, for ourselves, to meet ourselves. And that's the one I'm actually most interested in. They all matter. And they all have to be at every meal to make it really successful. Your kid will eat anything if you have all 5 of those at any meal. But eating for meaning means being in touch with what's going on inside you. So the game is, okay, buddy, tell me when you're half full. And that's a game changer, because now he's paying attention inside. That helps paying attention outside. And now you're getting in touch. It's a very interesting game when you try it. You'll see. Connection is what matters in growing healthy kids. And connection means understanding what's alive inside you and what's alive inside me. And those are about feelings, the weather inside you, the way I describe it. How can you teach that vocabulary to your children? It's probably the most important vocabulary you can teach her or him. And there are games you can play. I want you to think about how you teach a child the colors. You don't have to know the names of every single color on the planet, but you can start with the simple primary colors, right? You can start with 5 colors. And how do you do it? You go around and you say, look, blue, 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 until the light goes on. You've generalized, oh, blue. I have the feeling of blue now. You do the same thing with feelings. And the way to do it is while they're happening. Talking about feelings is a waste of time. You've got to nail them while they're happening. Oh, Billy, you're frustrated right now. That's just, it's not shaming it, just labeling it. I get it. That's what frustration is. He doesn't have to even acknowledge it. You want to play that just like you're teaching colors. And there are basically different shades of colors. There are 5 basic feelings. There's happy and sad, and angry, and afraid, and worried. You can add in a few others. And then there are all the shades in between them all. And you can get better and better at being a connoisseur about it, but start with the 5 basic ones. Here's a big problem I see with parents these days. They're too good at reading their kids' minds. They know everything they want and think and need, and they never give them a chance to say it. And then what the kid does is he gets pissed. If he feels uncomfortable, it must be your fault because you're not doing your job, because you've been reading their mind up till now. So what I'm advising is act up. Don't stop reading their mind and say, I don't get it, buddy. What is it that you're feeling right now? What's going on? Even though you know completely what's going on. And pull it out of him. That's an empowerment. Always give kids choice. Don't tell them what to do. Ask them, which do you want? You want to go to bed now, or do you want to have your green beans? If they want to go to bed, let them stick with the choice. By offering choice, you're empowering a child to decide things, and you're honoring that capacity in them. When you tell them you've got to finish doing blah, 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 you're cornering them, and then they become like a cornered animal, and you may not pay, you may get away with it now, but when they're 14, you're going to pay for it. One of my great honors was being asked to consult with Griffin Ivy Rose. I've known Orion for a long time, and Rachel I've known through her kids, and so it's a part of the family kind of thing, and Orion's dad and I are old friends. And so I was deeply touched that they were interested in creating a product line for kids, since that's my whole life. And it's been a great joy just being involved in watching this amazing products take off. The path of my practice has been ever deepening into a world of holistic medicine. And what's wonderful about the product line of Griffin Ivy Rose and everything they stand for in terms of quality for children, organic for children, is so in sync with and merges with the direction of what I'm doing in my life that it's kind of a no-brainer to be involved with this. Because I can put my stamp of approval on something that I know fits with everything I've been studying and all the research that's pointing to the health and importance of this in growing kids. One of my interests is using herbs in children. Herbs are plants. Plants are living things, complex living things, that live on the planet. And there's been various levels of science related to how plants, medicinal plants, can work in our body for thousands of years. Empirical science, Chinese medicine that's been around for 2,000 years has been meticulously studying these things. And now there's a whole body of research coming out about the use of medicinal plants for our health. Many of the new products the pharmaceutical companies are creating are deriving from plants they're finding in the Amazon. And the research is really taking off there. I find it's very useful in kids because they are complex little things like plants too. And the resonance that takes place between the plant human is much safer and more effective because it's resonating so cleanly than a pill that was made in a lab by a stranger in a condensed form, completely isolated with a lot of chemicals that the body now has to figure out when it's spent millennia understanding the planet. I'm a developmental pediatrician, so naturally one of the hot topics is ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And it's sort of a booming part of my practice because kids are strung out, parents are strung out, teachers are strung out. Everybody's concerned about getting a kid to focus in places where they don't want to focus, or they struggle to focus. But when you put that same kid on their video game, or out in the basketball field, or cooking or something, magically the focus problem goes away. How does that happen? Haven't you ever wondered, how does that happen? That means there's not some little focus center that's broken in your brain. If you can pay attention there, but not there, why aren't we looking at the context that's making it difficult to pay attention? Here's the formula. Very basic formula I tell every parent that comes to me. Interest equals attention. Interest equals attention. So we recognize that there are kids who are struggling to pay attention in certain settings. How come we're not looking at what would turn them on? What would turn their curiosity and interest on? How come we're only blaming the victim? In reality, our whole society has ADHD. Nobody's paying attention. They're not paying attention to the food they're eating. They're not paying attention to what their organs are saying inside their body. They're not paying attention to each other. They're too busy doing this, running for their lives, doing blah, 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 blah. Everybody's in a rush. So it's true, ADHD is a real thing, But it's a society-wide problem. There are just different levels of it, and kids are easy targets because they're not doing what we want them to do. What we want to do is raise the mindfulness or the awareness or the attention of our whole society, one kid at a time, one parent at a time, which means paying attention to yourself, to your needs, to your interests, paying attention to your child. When you pay attention to your child will pay attention to you, I guarantee it. But it's how you pay attention. If you pay attention by pointing fingers, they'll point fingers back. So attention can be trained. We've known this for thousands of years. In India, they were doing trainings on attention. It was called meditation. There's lots of levels of training attention. It doesn't have to be meditation. It's very easy to train attention. It just needs practice, everyday practice. And every single child can learn to pay attention. I've seen this in my practice for 30 years. The commitment to practice is the hard part. So we reach for the pill. One of the radical things that I seem to be known for doing in my practice is honoring who you are as a child, so that there's not this one-size-fits-all model. And the way I say it to kids is, every child has a secret power. And if we can figure out what your secret power is, we can learn how to grow it so that it fills the world. You can share it. When you share your secret power, when it's really grown, and you can share it effectively, using language, using your emotions, your heart, I call that a hero. The model I use for figuring out your secret power is very ancient. It goes back to Chinese medicine. Wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. And these 5 secret powers are linked to certain skills that you're naturally good at or interests that you're naturally drawn to. And when we start there and grab your attention that way, and then build it out so you get all of them going for you, you never have a problem. And I've seen this over and over and over with kids who are struggling, who aren't. When we design an herb formula for your secret power, it rounds it out. And then you feel more full-bodied, more like a hero. One of the real dilemmas is, how do you teach a child to pay attention to something they're not interested in? It's like a simple question. Right? We all have that problem. And yet we somehow manage to force ourselves and hate it and we get through it. It's not actually the joyful way of learning. And you end up forgetting it right afterwards. So we always have to ask what our goal is as parents. What I want is my kids to love learning. Now, what I've found is that empathy is one of the great ways of engaging kids' attention. And what I mean by that is, when they can understand what the teacher is needing, that's how I define empathy, by needs, they always get the A. So you make it like a game. See if you can figure out what the teacher needs. Ask a question. Simple. You're bored in a classroom. Ask a question. And your attention locks right in. Kids come in pissed off, complaining, I got a C, I hate that teacher. And I said, well, tell me, why did you get C? I did exactly what she said. I said, okay, well, that would be a C. It's not an A. An A goes beyond the call of duty. An A is a hero. A C does the bare minimum of what someone asked. That's a C. And kids look at me, what? That can't, is that right? Mommy, is that right? Yeah, that's called average. Challenges is inspiring teachers to love your child. That's a big challenge of mine. And it's a big part of my work with Turn a Soul Kids, my nonprofit. Trying to get teachers inspired again to fall in love with a kid who doesn't quite dance to the beat of the same drum as the rest of the class. If I can do that, the job's done. Problem solves itself. Because there's love in the room.